What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the NHL Playoff Predictions. In this case, we're going to be talking yet again about a team that could potentially miss the playoffs or make the playoffs. Today's edition, the Buffalo Sabres, a team that I hold very dear to my heart because it's an up and coming team that I have so much respect for. With Granado as their coach, one of the most underrated coaches, Kevin Adams, one of the most underrated GMs, and they had a pretty quiet deadline, but they added some important pieces that without giving up anything significant in return. But this team is fantastic. They're entertaining, and they have an opportunity to make the playoffs for the first time in about a decade, I would say. And, a lot of Buffalo Sabre fans are hoping and crossing their fingers that they make the playoffs this year. And so am I, because at the start of the season, I said the Buffalo Sabres will make the playoffs and they're going to be the most entertaining and surprising team heading to the season. And they've shocked a lot of people. Tage Thompson absolutely killing it this year, having a great season, living up to his new contract. Alex Tuck having a career year. Jeff Skinner proving once again that his contract is not as bad as we initially thought. Dylan Cousins having a good season. Jack Quinn having a fantastic rookie season. They add guys like Tyson Jost, Jordan Greenway throughout the season. And there's so much to talk about this team, and I'm so excited to talk about them. But Luca, what are your thoughts on the Buffalo Sabres? Can they surprise people? And in these last couple of games, this last stretch, essentially, make a playoff push and make the playoffs?
I mean, I think they can. I think anything's possible, especially with everything that's gone on and how well they've played. Look, I think for Buffalo, it's a little bit of a tough situation that they're in. Right, they've lost. They and their last. I think it's yeah. In their last 7 games, they've gone 2-5. Actually, two and six. No, yeah, no, 2-5. I was right. 2-5 in their last 7 games, and actually they've gone 2-6 in their last 8. And they haven't been at their best lately over the last couple of games. But they play Washington, then they play Philly. They've got Boston, Nashville, New Jersey, the Islanders, the Habs, the Rangers. They play the Rangers and the Devils twice. They play Carolina once. They play Florida once. They play Detroit, Ottawa, Columbus as well, Montreal, and they play Philly twice. So there's definitely some winnable games there for Buffalo, and it's obviously going to be dependent on other factors that go into this season. But one of the things that with Buffalo is that I kind of like what you said before, right? You like the Buffalo Sabres because they're an up and coming team. I think they've done a lot of really good things this season. I think they've actually made a lot of progress. Alex Tuck's been a revelation. Tage Thompson's been absolutely fantastic this season. Jeff Skinner is living up to his $9 million contract that he's been paid over the last couple of years. So there's been that as well. And then obviously you go and look at the other guys that they have in their lineup. Casey Middlestat's having a really good year. Paterka and Jack Quinn, as well as Dylan Cousins, are all playing good hockey. So Buffalo's got a really interesting core here. But I think with Buffalo, and it's always been kind of my concern with Buffalo, and I think that it's something that I think Sabres fans can agree with. I don't know how ready they are for the playoffs, right? And the reason I say that is because I think goaltending is their weakest link at the moment. If you look at their goaltending situation, it's Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, it's Craig Anderson, and obviously Eric Comrie's there, but he's injured at the moment. He's currently listed as week to week. So I'm not too high on Buffalo's goaltending situation. I know Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's played well lately. And he's been that type of guy where this season he's looked good at times, but he's also struggled at times. I just don't know if he's the answer right now in net. Craig Anderson, I mean, look, he had a great game against the Leafs. We know what Craig Anderson is capable of doing. The problem with Craig Anderson is he's at the point at the end of his career. Is he able to carry Buffalo to another playoff run essentially and see what they're capable of doing in that sense? I'm not 100% sure. They haven't made the playoffs since 2011, Buffalo. So I think just for Sabres fans, just to experience playoff hockey, I think would be something they would want. But at the same time, let's also be realistic here and say maybe Buffalo is still 1.5 years out from potentially, being a playoff team and competing full time over there. So that's going to be something to definitely talk about and pay attention to.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Like, if they would make the playoffs, I would think that Craig Anderson would be lights out because when it comes to playoff hockey, especially when he was with the Ottawa Senators, he would steal games and he would
Yeah.
cause teams a lot of trouble. And he was part of the Ottawa Senators team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. So obviously he has what it takes. Obviously he's up there in age. How many games can he really get into the playoffs? Wear and tear essentially could be a factor in his game that could either make it or break it for him. In terms of their defense, I believe that they're a fantastic core. They're up and coming. Just look at this list. I just believe that you know they're not there, unfortunately. Like, they've had another fantastic season where they progressed into the right direction, and even Steve Yzerman said it, that Ottawa and Buffalo are miles ahead in terms of development, compared to the Detroit Red Wings, and I believe that is a fact. And just thinking about the Buffalo Sabres making the playoffs would be amazing, but unfortunately the Pittsburgh Penguins always find a way to make the playoffs, even if they're not playing the best hockey. And they went through a really bad stretch at one point throughout the season. They were very inconsistent at one point, too. So, this could possibly be the last year that the Pittsburgh Penguins make the playoffs. But that's a good thing because it opens up like a door for the Ottawa Senators or Buffalo Sabres to make the playoffs next year if they fail to do so this year. But in terms of looking at the standings right now, it's fairly close. And the Buffalo Sabres do have a couple of games in hand compared to Florida and the New York Islanders. But the thing is that they're going to have to, win the next couple of games and make sure that the Pittsburgh Penguins, New York Islanders, and Florida Panthers, lose a couple of games and potentially maybe going on a losing streak. But Pittsburgh's been, really good as of late. Florida's been really good as of late. The same thing, the New York Islanders and Buffalo and Ottawa have been somewhat choking in a sense, and they've been dropping games that they're supposed to be winning since they had a couple of games in hand, especially. And it's kind of unfortunate that we're kind of seeing them, regress a little bit at the most important time of the year where they're supposed to solidify themselves as a playoff team. And, you know, I do believe that, Buffalo will not make the playoffs, unfortunately, even though I've been rooting for them the whole year. And they've been such a great team to watch. And I think the Buffalo Sabres fan base could agree with that as well. But because Pittsburgh, the New York Islanders, and Florida have that experience on that team, and the Buffalo Sabres and Ottawa Senators do have a couple players with experience, but overall, they're a very young team. That's where the edge is essentially. That's where Florida, the New York Islanders, and Pittsburgh Penguins have the edge over teams like Buffalo and Ottawa. But
Well,
I'm not saying that Buffalo and Ottawa are like so much worse compared to those teams. I would say they're equally as good or even better. But unfortunately, they're not winning the games that they're supposed to be winning right now.
so it's going to be an interesting situation, right? So Buffalo's currently 5 points out of a playoff spot for the final wild card, which is the Islanders, and they're 7 points out from Pittsburgh, right? So this, to me, I look at Buffalo and I look at their strength of schedule that they have, right? And I mentioned it before. They play Philly twice, they play Montreal once, they play Detroit, who's out of the playoffs, once, they play Washington once as well, and they play Columbus. To me, that's 7 wins right there. Okay, if they win all those games, that's 7 wins, right? Because Philly twice, Montreal once, um, you know, you've got Detroit once, you've got Washington once, that's 6, and then you obviously have potentially the Ottawa Senators and the Columbus Blue Jackets as one, as two there. So that's about 7 or 8 wins there. Then you play New Jersey twice, the Rangers once, the Islanders, who you have to beat that game that you play them. And you play the Rangers twice, actually, and then you play Carolina as well, and you play Florida, who you have to beat. It's going to be an interesting 16 games for Buffalo if they can go 10-6. 10-6 during that run, right? 10-6 would put them at 43 wins this season. I think that's maybe good enough to make the playoffs for Buffalo. It's going to be interesting to see how they do, right? I don't think it's impossible. I think obviously playing Florida and the Islanders in twice in their next 16 games is going to be crucial for them. They're going to need to win. But not only that, they play a lot of non-playoff teams. Like I said before, Columbus, right? Philadelphia, Detroit, Ottawa, and Washington are all behind them in the standings, right? These are all winnable games. These are all against winnable teams. Montreal as well. So they play every single team that's below them in the standings in the Eastern Conference during the playoffs, and then obviously they get Carolina, New Jersey, and the Rangers as well. So it's definitely doable for the Sabres. I'm not saying it's not. I look at the Islanders and how well they've been in their last 10 games. I look at how well Pittsburgh's been in their last 10 games. I look at Florida to some example as well, and I'm saying to myself, these three teams are playing like teams that want to make the playoffs, and Buffalo's kind of digressing. Washington's kind of digressing. Ottawa has been on a really big cold streak the last couple of games, right? So is it really enough? And I think it's going to come down to goaltending. And if I look at the goaltending situation, Buffalo's got the weakest out of the four teams that are there, right? Out of Florida, Florida, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo, they've got the weakest. And they didn't do enough at the deadline to add, which I think also hurt their chances in the playoffs a little bit. I know they added Jordan Greenway and they added Riley Stillman. I don't think that was enough for them. I think they should have gone out and potentially get some goaltending depth. I know they're big on Luukkonen, and they have Devin Levi potentially coming up in the future, so they didn't really need a long-term answer. But I think for short-term, I don't know how much you trust in Craig Anderson, and if you're really serious about making the playoffs, I think it could have been something to look at. Even a guy like Jonathan Quick, let's say, would have been a really good addition for them. But the other thing, too, is that, I like Buffalo. Like I said, I like what they're building over there. Jeff Skinner's had a resurgent season. Tage Thompson, we can talk about him all day. Rasmus Dahlin's been out of this world. Owen Power has been really good in his first career NHL season. Obviously, the points haven't been there, but defensively, he's been solid. So I like what they're doing, and I think that Buffalo's in a position where they're going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. And I'm not worried about Buffalo's future. I think Kevin Adams and Don Granato have done a great job there in Buffalo to get that group to where they're supposed to be. And I think they need to add a couple of more pieces. They have the cap space to do it. I think they're going to go out there during the offseason, make a few more moves that are going to bolster their team, and potentially they'll be in the hunt next year. I just don't know if this is the year that they're going to do it. It really depends on how many games they're able to win between now and the end of the season and what's going to happen with the other results, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, you need to win, but you also need some luck on your side as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I totally agree with all those points. And this is not a season to be disappointed about, Sabre fans. This is a
absolutely not.
season to be very proud of. Look at the top four. People have over 60 points. There's some players on good teams that don't even have 60 points,
Yeah,
and the Buffalo Sabres are not even a playoff team currently as it
yeah,
stands in the standings. So for years to come, if they could keep this pace up in terms of their level of production of offense, this is going to be a very scary and good team. And this is going to be a team that's going to beat a lot of good teams and make and surprise a lot of people. And they have surprised this year.
yeah,
And Alex Tuck, one of the biggest surprises this year, having a career season, 30-goal season. Like not only that, but they also added Peyton Krebs a couple years back with the Jack Eichel trade. So like a lot of like the Jack Eichel trade kind of laid the foundation for some of the great players that Buffalo has right now, and it's going to help them for years to come. There's Matthew Savoie that's going to be with the team in a couple of years as well. They have a fantastic prospect pool that is not even playing right now. None of them have played any
yeah,
NHL games. So
yeah,
once they get a couple of NHL games in, and especially having this young core that they have, I'm not going to say that they're going to stick with this core forever because eventually, you got to take contracts into consideration. The salary cap. You can't keep everybody. You're going to have to lose some people. But this is going to be a team that's going to be very, very exciting to watch and a team to keep an eye on for sure. And Dahlin, if it wasn't for Eric Carlson's fantastic season, Dahlin would have been like I would still say he's top three in terms of the Norris conversation, but I would probably have him as
yeah.
my
He's
favorite.
slowed down. He's slowed down as of late. He had a really good start to the year. He's kind of slowed down since then, but I mean, it was expected, right? He wasn't going to pull up Eric Carlson numbers. I think that what Eric Carlson's doing this season is just ridiculous and is not normal. But I don't. It's normal that he slowed down, Darlene, but he's still a point per game, more than a point per game. So he's been good. Dylan Cousins has been a really good story. I'm happy for him. Obviously, got that contract extension too, which kicks in next year. So he's playing really good hockey, and I think the Buffalo's got themselves a really good 1-2 punch with Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins for the future, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And like you said, Alex Tuck, since he's come in, has played better than Jack Eichel has in Vegas, has put up more points. And obviously, he just came back from injury, which I think is going to be a huge boost for the Sabres. Obviously, as you know, he scored 2 goals against the Leafs last night in a big win for them. So he's definitely an important part of that team. Obviously, the Sabres don't have Matthias Samuelsson on defense. He's been a big story for them. Very good defensively. He's currently out week to week. So it's going to be tough to see what the Sabres are going to do, but I'm optimistic. I'm going to go bold here, and I know I was kind of talking crazy before. I think the Sabres are going to make it on the last day of the season. That's what
Wow.
I think is going to happen.
Look,
I think they're going to edge it out. They're going to beat out the Islanders for the final wild card spot, and they're going to end up playing Boston in the first round. That's what I think is going to happen.
my heart says Buffalo because, I was defending this team since the start of the season, but, I also don't want to, create expectations for myself for Sabres fans and say, like, yeah, they're going to make it 100%. Que sera, sera. That means whatever happens, happens. And I'm rooting for the Buffalo Sabres. That's the team I want to be going for if they do make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And, there's so much to be excited about. And I would like to say one last point. KC Middlestat. Everyone thought this guy was going to be a
Yep.
bust. And
Yeah.
look at the season he's having. Victor Olofsson, a guy that they wanted to trade for the last 2 years, and look at him go. He's on pace to have
24 goals.
a 30 goal season. So
Yep.
there's a lot to be excited for, guys, and we'll see what happens. I'm crossing my fingers. I think Luca is crossing his fingers too. But make sure to write your predictions in the comment section below. Do the Buffalo Sabres make the playoffs, or do they miss the playoffs? And what are the key factors to help them push for a last minute playoff spot? And heading into the playoffs, which team would you like to face? Because as of right now, if they do make a wild card spot, they're potentially going to face a team like Boston, the Hurricanes, or the New Jersey Devils. Three mega teams, and that's going to be a tough series for the Sabres or for any team that finishes in the wild card. So, guys,
Yeah.
make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast.